The tuxedo felt too tight around Garrison Holloway's neck as he wheeled himself away from the ballroom. The charity gala's chatter faded behind him, replaced by blessed quiet. He took a deep breath, loosened his bow tie, and closed his eyes. "What's wrong with your legs?" Garrison's eyes snapped open. A small boy with round cheeks and almond-shaped eyes stood in front of him, head tilted in curiosity. The child couldn't have been more than 6 years old. "They don't work anymore," Garrison answered simply. "That's why I use this chair." The boy nodded, processing this information with surprising seriousness. "My name is Elliot," he said, extending a small hand. "I like your rolling chair. Get ready. You think you know where this story's going? But trust me, you don't. Let us know where you're listening from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel." Despite himself, Garrison smiled. It was the first genuine interaction he'd had all evening. No awkward pity, no overly cheerful compensation, just straightforward curiosity. "I'm Garrison. Nice to meet you, Elliot. Want to see my pictures?" Without waiting for an answer, Elliot thrust a folder of drawings toward him. The artwork was unexpectedly detailed. Intricate patterns of stars and circles, houses with every window carefully drawn, people with expressive faces. Each page revealed a world seen through unique eyes. "These are amazing," Garrison said, meaning it. Elliot beamed. "Nobody at the home draws like me." "The home?" "Where I live with the other kids. Miss Laura says someone might pick me, but it's harder because—" He pointed to his face. "I'm different." Garrison's chest tightened. He recognized Down syndrome in Elliot's features, but all he saw was a bright-eyed boy with extraordinary talent. "Being different isn't bad," Garrison said softly. "I'm different too." "Mr. Holloway?" A woman in a navy suit appeared, slightly breathless. "I'm so sorry. Elliot wanders sometimes." She reached for the boy's hand. "Come on, sweetie. Time to rejoin the group." "He's not bothering me," Garrison said quickly. The woman smiled apologetically. "He's part of our adoption showcase tonight. Potential families are meeting the children in the main hall." Something stirred in Garrison, a feeling he couldn't immediately identify. "He's up for adoption?" "Yes. Elliot came to us as an infant. His birth parents surrendered him shortly after his diagnosis." She lowered her voice. "It can be challenging to place children with special needs." Garrison watched as Elliot carefully gathered his drawings. The boy looked up and waved. "Bye, chairman." "Goodbye, Elliot," Garrison replied, raising his hand in return. Long after they'd gone, Garrison remained in the quiet hallway, unable to shake the encounter from his mind. 3 weeks later, Garrison sat in the spacious office of his Vermont estate, staring at adoption paperwork spread across his desk. Outside, snow fell gently on the pine trees that surrounded his property. 30 acres of isolation he'd purchased after the accident that took his mobility and his former life. "You can't be serious about this." Wren, his personal assistant, placed a cup of coffee beside him. Her expression conveyed both concern and disbelief. "I've never been more serious about anything," Garrison replied, not looking up from the forms. "A child? With special needs?" Wren leaned against the desk. "You barely leave this house. You canceled your last 3 physical therapy appointments with Amir. Some days you don't even get dressed. Maybe that's the problem." Garrison finally met her gaze. "What am I doing with all this?" He gestured around him at the vaulted ceilings and expensive furnishings. "Building accessibility software made me rich, but what's the point? I have no one to share it with." "Because Jessica left?" "That was 2 years ago, Garrison." A familiar pain twisted in his chest at the mention of his ex-fiancée. She'd stuck around for 6 months after the climbing accident, then decided a life with a paraplegic wasn't what she'd signed up for. "This isn't about Jessica. It's about Elliot." He pushed a photograph across the desk, a copy the adoption agency had provided. "Look at him, Wren. Really, look at him. Wren's expression softened as she studied the picture of Elliot smiling, clutching a drawing pad. "He's been in the system his entire life," Garrison continued. "His birth parents gave him up because he has Down syndrome. Nobody wants him because he's too difficult. Do you know what that feels like? To be dismissed because you're not perfect?" Wren sat down across from him. "Of course I understand why you connect with him. But parenting is hard enough for people without disabilities. So I should just accept that I don't deserve a family? That I can't be a father because I can't walk?" Anger crept into his voice. "I have resources. I can modify this house, hire help, provide opportunities most kids only dream of." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Wren sighed. "I just want you to be prepared for the fight ahead. The adoption agency has already expressed concerns about your situation." Garrison's jaw tightened. "My situation doesn't define what I'm capable of. I built a tech empire from nothing. I can certainly figure out how to raise a child." The doorbell rang, echoing through the cavernous foyer. "That'll be Thaddeus," Garrison said grimly. "Right on schedule." Wren raised an eyebrow. "You told your brother?" "No, but news travels fast in this family." Minutes later, Senator Thaddeus Holloway strode into the office without knocking, still wearing his camel haircoat dusted with snow. At 42, he carried himself with the practiced confidence of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. "Have you lost your mind?" Thaddeus demanded without preamble. "Hello to you too, brother." Garrison continued filling out his forms. "Mom called me in a panic. Said you were adopting some disabled kid?" Thaddeus paced the office. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" "I don't particularly care how it looks." "Well, you should. I'm announcing my gubernatorial run next month. The last thing I need is my brother creating a spectacle." Garrison set down his pen. "A spectacle? Is that what you think parenthood is?" "Be realistic, Garrison. You can barely take care of yourself. How are you going to manage a child? And one with Down syndrome, no less? It's doubly disastrous." The words hit like physical blows, but Garrison kept his expression neutral. "I appreciate your concern, but this isn't up for debate. I'm adopting Elliot." Thaddeus stopped pacing. "You've named it already?" "Him," Garrison corrected, his voice dangerously quiet. "His name is Elliot." "This is exactly the kind of impulsive decision-making that concerns me." Thaddeus lowered his voice, adopting what Garrison recognized as his politician tone. "Listen, if you're lonely, get a dog. Join a support group. Hell, I'll set you up with someone who doesn't mind your limitations. But this is selfish." Garrison wheeled himself around the desk until he was directly in front of his brother. "What's selfish is abandoning a child because he doesn't meet your standards of perfection. What's selfish is caring more about your political image than your brother's happiness." "You have no idea what you're getting into," Thaddeus warned. "Maybe not, but I'm going to find out." Garrison turned back to his desk. "You can see yourself out." After Thaddeus left, Wren returned with fresh coffee and a concerned expression. "That went well." Garrison managed a small smile. "It's just the beginning. Once this gets out, everyone will have an opinion." "And you're prepared for that?" He thought of Elliot's bright eyes, the careful way he'd shown his drawings, the innocence with which he'd asked about the chair. For the first time since the accident, Garrison felt something other than bitterness and loss. He felt purpose. "I built my company creating tools that help people overcome limitations," he said. "Now I need to prove I can overcome my own." The first home visit from the adoption agency came 2 weeks later. Miss Pearson, a stern woman with gray-streaked hair and a clipboard, examined every inch of Garrison's estate with critical eyes. "The house will need significant modifications," she noted as she wrote something down. "Doorways widened, safety features installed." "Already in progress," Garrison replied, gesturing to the construction crew working in what would become Elliot's wing of the house. "The entire east wing is being converted into a sensory-friendly space with adaptive features for both his needs and mine." Miss Pearson's expression remained impassive. "Mr. Holloway, I'll be frank. Your application has raised eyebrows. A single man with a disability seeking to adopt a child with special needs. It's unprecedented in our agency's history. Perhaps that's the problem, Garrison countered. Children like Elliot are deemed unadoptable because everyone assumes they need perfect parents. But what they really need is understanding. Understanding doesn't help when a child is having a meltdown and you can't physically reach him, Miss Pearson said bluntly. What happens if he runs into the street and you can't chase after him? The question stung, but Garrison had anticipated it. I've hired a child safety consultant to address those specific concerns. The property will be secured, and I'm installing smart home technology that allows me to monitor and control access points remotely. He held her gaze. And yes, I will have help. Ren has agreed to stay on, and Amir, my physical therapist, is training to assist with Elliot's potential motor development needs. Miss Pearson made another note. Your financial resources are impressive, Mr. Holloway, but money can't solve everything. No, Garrison agreed. But love might, and I have plenty to give. Something in Miss Pearson's expression shifted slightly. We'll be watching this placement very carefully. The first 3 months will be probationary. After she left, Garrison wheeled himself to the large window overlooking the snowy landscape. For years, he'd viewed his wealth as compensation for what he'd lost, a consolation prize for a life derailed. Now, it might be the key to creating something new. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Tech mogul's controversial adoption bid raises questions about fitness. The media had caught wind of the story. Garrison closed the alert without reading further. Let them talk. Let his family object. Let the world doubt him. In his mind, he could still see Elliot smile as he shared his artwork. Being different isn't bad, he had told the boy. Now it was time to prove it. 3 months passed in a blur of paperwork, interviews, and home renovations. When the day finally came for Elliot to move in, Garrison hardly slept the night before. He wheeled through the newly converted wing of his house one last time, checking every detail. The walls were painted in calm blues and greens. The furniture was sturdy but soft-edged. Special lighting could be brightened or dimmed with simple voice commands. Doorways had been widened, safety locks installed, and an indoor playground built to help with Elliot's motor skills. "It looks perfect," Ren said, appearing in the doorway with coffee. "You've thought of everything." "I hope so." Garrison accepted the mug with slightly shaking hands. "They'll be here in an hour." Ren sat on the edge of a colorful beanbag chair. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Garrison admitted. "What if he doesn't like it here? What if I can't be what he needs?" "Children need love, safety, and patience," Ren said. "You've got plenty of all three." When the adoption agency van pulled up outside, Garrison's heart pounded. Miss Pearson stepped out first, still looking doubtful. Then came Elliot, clutching his folder of drawings and a small backpack. Everything he owned in the world. Garrison wheeled himself onto the front porch. "Hello, Elliot. Welcome home." The boy stared up at the large house with wide eyes. "Is this all yours?" "It's ours now," Garrison corrected gently. Elliot walked up the wheelchair ramp and stopped in front of Garrison. "You remembered me." "Of course I did. Most people forget." Elliot said this matter-of-factly, without self-pity. Miss Pearson handed Garrison a thick folder. "His medical records, school information, and schedule of check-ins. I'll be back next week for our first home visit." After she left, Garrison asked, "Would you like to see your room?" Elliot nodded eagerly. As they moved through the house, Garrison pointed out different rooms and explained how things worked. When they reached Elliot's bedroom, the boy froze in the doorway, mouth open in amazement. The room had a space theme, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and planets hanging from special hooks. A reading nook was filled with books, and a large art table stood by the window, stocked with every type of drawing supply imaginable. "Is this all for me?" Elliot whispered. "All for you," Garrison confirmed. I remember how much you like to draw." Elliot walked slowly around the room, touching things with careful fingers. He stopped at the art table and picked up a set of colored pencils. "These are the really good kind," he said with awe. "Only the best for my son," Garrison replied, the word son still new on his tongue. Elliot looked up sharply. "Am I really your son now?" "Well, not officially yet. There's more paperwork and waiting. But in all the ways that matter, yes, if you want to be." Elliot thought about this for a moment, his face serious. Then he nodded. "I want to be." The first few weeks were both wonderful and challenging. Elliot had nightmares almost every night, waking up crying for people Garrison didn't know, probably caregivers from the group home. During the day, he was sometimes quiet and watchful, as if waiting for something bad to happen. Garrison learned to read Elliot's moods and needs. He discovered that when Elliot tugged at his ears, he was feeling overwhelmed by noise. When he rocked back and forth, he needed deep pressure, a tight hug, or a weighted blanket. They developed their own language of signals and gestures. Garrison insisted on handling many care tasks himself, even when they were difficult from his wheelchair. He found ways to adapt, using tools with extended handles, installing lower sinks and counters, creating routines that worked for both of them. One morning, as Garrison helped Elliot brush his teeth, he heard the front door open. "Hello?" called a familiar voice. "Where's my favorite nephew?" "Uncle Amir!" Elliot dropped his toothbrush and ran from the bathroom. Garrison wheeled after him, smiling. Though not actually related, Amir had embraced his role as Elliot's uncle with enthusiasm. The physical therapist had become a regular visitor, helping both Garrison and Elliot with exercises designed to build strength and coordination. "Ready for our swimming lesson today?" Amir asked, swinging Elliot up for a hug. "Yes. Dad said I can try without the floaties if you think I'm ready." Dad. The word still gave Garrison a warm feeling every time he heard it. After Elliot ran to get his swim things, Amir turned to Garrison. "How are you holding up?" "Tired," Garrison admitted. "But good tired, the kind that means something." "And the family situation?" Garrison's smile faded. "Still bad. Thaddeus is pressuring our parents to intervene. They want to meet with me next week." "Will you go?" "I have to try. They're Elliot's only grandparents." The dinner at his parents' estate was everything Garrison had feared. His mother, Elizabeth, spent most of the evening asking pointed questions about Elliot's behavior and education. His father, Richard, barely spoke, studying Garrison with disapproving eyes. "I simply don't understand the rush," Elizabeth said, cutting her steak into precise pieces. "If you wanted a child, there are agencies that specialize in finding healthy infants." "Elliot isn't sick, Mother. He has Down syndrome. It's a difference, not a disease." "You know what I mean." She waved her hand dismissively. "A normal child wouldn't be such a strain on you." Garrison set down his fork. "There's nothing wrong with Elliot. He's bright, creative, and loving." "Of course you'd say that," Thaddeus interjected. "You've invested so much in this charity project that you can't admit it was a mistake." "He's not a project," Garrison said, his voice rising. "He's my son." Elizabeth sighed. "Darling, be reasonable. We're thinking of both of you. That child would be better off with normal parents who can run after him, take him to sports practices, give him a mother's love." The room fell silent. Garrison stared at his mother, her words hanging in the air between them. "I think we're done here." He pushed back from the table and wheeled himself toward the door. "Garrison, don't be dramatic," his father finally spoke. "Your mother is just concerned." "No, she's embarrassed. You all are." Garrison turned to face his family. "You were embarrassed when I came home in a wheelchair, and you're embarrassed now that I've adopted a child who doesn't fit your perfect image." "That's not fair," Thaddeus protested. "Isn't it? When was the last time any of you visited me? When was the last time you asked how I was really doing?" Garrison shook his head. "I don't need your approval. Elliot and I are a family now, with or without you." That night, after driving home in silence, Garrison found Wren waiting up with a cup of tea. "That bad?" she asked. "Worse." He accepted the tea gratefully. "My mother suggested Elliot would be better off with normal parents." Wren winced. "I'm sorry, Garrison." "It doesn't matter. We don't need them. Everyone needs family. Elliot and I have each other, and we have you and Amir." Garrison smiled tiredly. "The family we choose is more important than the family we're born with." Later, Garrison wheeled quietly into Elliot's room to check on him. The boy was fast asleep, surrounded by stuffed animals and clutching a drawing he'd made that day, a picture of himself and Garrison in front of their house, holding hands. "I promise we'll always be a family," Garrison whispered, adjusting Elliot's blanket. "No matter what anyone says." The adoption hearing was scheduled for the end of the month. As it approached, Garrison threw himself into preparing, gathering character references, and documenting Elliot's progress in their home. Elliot was thriving in many ways. His vocabulary was expanding, he was making friends at his new specialized school, and his artwork continued to amaze everyone who saw it. But there were challenges too. Certain loud noises still triggered meltdowns. He struggled with changes to his routine, and sometimes he retreated into himself, becoming temporarily unreachable. One evening, as Garrison was reviewing paperwork in his office, Wren appeared in the doorway looking concerned. "We might have a problem," she said. "Octavia's on the phone. She says it's urgent." Octavia Chen was Garrison's business partner, the brilliant coder who had helped him build their company from the ground up. "Put her through." Garrison picked up the phone. "Octavia, what's wrong?" "The Walker deal fell through," she said without preamble. "And the European expansion is hemorrhaging money. We're in trouble, Garrison." A cold feeling settled in his stomach. "How bad?" "Bad enough that if we don't find new investors within 3 months, we might lose everything." After the call ended, Garrison sat in silence, his mind racing. The company had been stable when he stepped back to focus on Elliot. Now it was on the verge of collapse. "What are you going to do?" Wren asked quietly. "Whatever I have to." Garrison wheeled over to the window, looking out at the night sky. This house, the staff, Elliot's therapies and education, it all depends on my finances. "Maybe it's time to go back to work?" Garrison nodded slowly. "I'll call Octavia in the morning. We'll figure something out." But the next day brought another crisis. Judge Franklin, who would be presiding over their adoption case, was interviewed in the local paper. He spoke at length about his commitment to traditional family values and the importance of strong father and mother figures in a child's development. Wren read the article aloud while Garrison listened, his expression growing darker with each word. "He's practically announcing he's going to rule against us," Garrison said when she finished. "We don't know that for sure. Don't we? A single father in a wheelchair trying to adopt a child with special needs? I'm everything Judge Franklin stands against." Before Wren could respond, they heard a thump from upstairs, followed by a crash and a cry. Garrison immediately wheeled toward the elevator he'd had installed, but it was frustratingly slow. By the time he reached Elliot's room, the boy was on the floor, his body jerking in a seizure. Wren was already beside him, carefully turning him onto his side. "Call 911, Garrison ordered, his voice tight with fear. He maneuvered his chair as close as possible, but couldn't get down to Elliot's level. "How long has he been seizing?" "Just started when I got here," Wren said, already on the phone with emergency services. The seizure ended before the ambulance arrived. Elliot lay exhausted and confused in Wren's arms, asking repeatedly for Garrison. "I'm right here, buddy," Garrison said, reaching down from his chair to hold Elliot's hand. "You're okay. You're safe." At the hospital, doctors confirmed what the adoption agency had warned might happen. Elliot occasionally experienced seizures, a complication some children with Down syndrome faced. They'd been rare in recent years, which was why Garrison hadn't been told it was an ongoing concern. As they prepared to return home, a woman in a suit approached them in the waiting room. "Mr. Holloway, I'm Janet Morris from Child Protective Services. We received a call about an incident with Elliot." Garrison felt his heart sink. "He had a seizure. The doctors say he's fine now." "I understand, but I need to file a report about the circumstances." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to his wheelchair. "Were you able to provide immediate assistance when the seizure began?" "I got there as quickly as I could. My assistant was with him right away." "I see." She made a note in her file. "And is your assistant always present when you're caring for Elliot?" "Not always, no. I'm fully capable of caring for my son." Janet's expression remained neutral. "Of course. This is just a routine follow-up. I'll need to schedule a home visit to complete my assessment." That evening, after Elliot was finally asleep, Garrison wheeled into his room to check on him one more time. The medication had made the boy drowsy, but before falling asleep, he'd been determined to finish a new drawing. On the wall above his bed, Elliot had taped the completed picture. In colorful block letters, he had written, "Stay forever," above a drawing of himself and Garrison holding hands. Garrison reached up to touch the paper, his vision blurring with tears. Elliot had no idea that their future together hung in the balance, threatened by financial troubles, family opposition, a conservative judge, and now a CPS report questioning Garrison's ability to keep him safe. "I'm not going anywhere," Garrison whispered, though he wasn't sure how he would keep that promise. "We'll face whatever comes together." "All rise for the Honorable Judge Franklin." Garrison straightened in his wheelchair as the judge entered the courtroom. After weeks of preparation and worry, the day of the adoption hearing had finally arrived. Beside him, his lawyer, Marion Cole, arranged her papers with calm efficiency. "Nervous?" she whispered. "Terrified," Garrison admitted. The courtroom was nearly empty, just Garrison's team, the representatives from the adoption agency, and, to Garrison's surprise, Thaddeus sitting in the back row. Elliot waited outside with Wren, drawing pictures to pass the time. Judge Franklin, a stern-faced man in his 60s, peered down at them over reading glasses. "We're here today to determine the petition of Garrison Holloway to adopt Elliot James Thompson. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marion replied. "Before we begin, I have a question." Judge Franklin looked directly at Garrison. "Mr. Holloway, the report from Child Protective Services indicates that you were unable to reach the child during a medical emergency. How do you respond to concerns about your physical limitations as they relate to childcare?" Garrison felt his face grow hot. "Your Honor, while it's true that my wheelchair sometimes presents challenges, I've modified my home extensively to ensure Elliot's safety. The incident in question was handled promptly, with my assistant reaching him within seconds while I was on my way." "But you weren't the first person to reach him," the judge pressed. "No, Your Honor. But a parent who can walk might have been in another room, or outside, or at work when a seizure occurred. The important thing is that Elliot received immediate care." Judge Franklin made a note. "Let's proceed." For the next hour, witnesses spoke about Garrison's capabilities as a father. Amir testified about the physical adaptations Garrison had made to care for Elliot. Elliot's teachers described his progress and happiness. Even Miss Pearson from the adoption agency admitted that Elliot had thrived in Garrison's care. Then came the surprise. When it was time for opposing arguments, Thaddeus rose and approached the bench. "Your Honor, I'd like to address the court as the petitioner's brother." Garrison tensed. What was Thaddeus doing? "Mr. Holloway, are you opposing this adoption?" Judge Franklin asked. Thaddeus glanced at Garrison. "No, Your Honor. I'm here to support it." A murmur of surprise ran through the courtroom. Garrison stared at his brother in disbelief. "Our family has had concerns," Thaddeus continued. "I personally questioned whether my brother could handle the responsibilities of parenthood given his disability. I was wrong." He turned to face Garrison directly. "I've watched you fight for this child with everything you have. You've shown me what it means to be a real father." Garrison felt a lump forming in his throat. "Your Honor," Thaddeus concluded, My brother may not be able to run after Elliot, but he's moved mountains to give him a home. I can't think of a better parent for this child." Judge Franklin studied Thaddeus thoughtfully. "Thank you for your testimony, Senator Holloway. We'll take a brief recess before I render my decision." As the judge left the courtroom, Thaddeus approached Garrison. "Why the change of heart?" Garrison asked. Thaddeus sat in the chair beside him. "I visited your house last week. Wren let me in while you were at therapy with Elliot. She never mentioned it. I asked her not to. I wanted to see how you really lived, not the show you'd put on for family." Thaddeus looked down at his hands. "I saw what you've built for him, Garrison. The modified rooms, the learning tools, the art studio. And I saw his drawings of you. Dozens of them. In every single one, you're smiling." Garrison couldn't remember the last time he'd seen his brother look so sincere. "The truth is," Thaddeus continued, "I've been wrong about a lot of things, including what makes a good father." Before Garrison could respond, the bailiff announced the judge's return. They rose as Judge Franklin took his seat again. "After reviewing the evidence and testimony, I've reached a decision." The judge removed his glasses. "While I have concerns about the unique challenges this arrangement presents, I'm persuaded by the clear bond between Mr. Holloway and the child, as well as the extensive support system that has been established." Garrison held his breath. "Therefore, I am granting the petition for adoption. Elliot James Thompson is now legally Elliot James Holloway." Relief washed over Garrison like a wave. Marion squeezed his shoulder in congratulation. "However," Judge Franklin continued, "I am ordering quarterly home visits by Child Protective Services for the next 2 years to ensure that the child's needs continue to be met appropriately." "Thank you, Your Honor," Garrison said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down." Outside the courtroom, Elliot looked up from his drawing when Garrison and Thaddeus emerged. "Is it done? Are you my forever dad now?" Garrison nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Yes, buddy. It's official. You're Elliot Holloway now." Elliot broke into a huge smile and ran to Garrison, climbing onto his lap and throwing his arms around his neck. "I knew it! I knew you'd keep me!" Over Elliot's shoulder, Garrison mouthed "thank you" to his brother. Thaddeus nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. Their celebration was short-lived. The next morning, Octavia arrived at the house with grave news. "The system crashed during the beta test," she explained, pacing Garrison's office. "All that client data, gone. We're facing multiple lawsuits already." Garrison rubbed his face tiredly. "How bad is the damage?" "Bad enough that we might not recover. The investors are pulling out." Octavia sat heavily on the couch. "I'm sorry, Garrison. I know this couldn't come at a worse time." Within weeks, the company Garrison had built from nothing was on the verge of bankruptcy. Assets were sold, staff let go. Garrison put the Vermont estate on the market, knowing he could no longer afford its upkeep. "Where will we go?" Elliot asked as he watched movers pack their belongings. "We're getting an apartment in the city," Garrison explained. "It'll be smaller, but we'll still be together." "Will Wren come too?" Garrison hesitated. Most of his staff had already found other jobs. "Wren will visit, but she won't live with us anymore." To his surprise, Wren spoke up from the doorway. "Actually, that's not true. I'm coming with you." "Wren, I can't pay you what you're worth anymore." "Then pay me what you can." She knelt beside Elliot. "Someone has to help this little artist organize his supplies, right?" Their new home was a 3-bedroom apartment in a building with elevator access. Though modest compared to the estate, Garrison had made sure it had adaptations for both his and Elliot's needs. Still, the change was difficult for everyone. Elliot struggled most of all. The move disrupted his carefully established routines. The new school wasn't as understanding of his needs. His speech, which had been improving, regressed. Worst of all, the stress triggered more seizures. One particularly bad day, Garrison was called to the school to pick Elliot up early. He found his son curled in a ball in the nurse's office, refusing to speak. "What happened?" Garrison asked the principal, who stood nearby with a stern expression. "Elliot had an outburst in class," the principal explained. "He threw his books and disrupted the entire lesson." "Did something trigger him?" "The teacher reports that some students were teasing him about his speech. We've addressed that, of course, but Elliot's reaction was unacceptable." The principal lowered his voice. "Mr. Holloway, have you considered that perhaps Elliot needs a more specialized environment? Our school isn't really equipped for children with his level of challenges." Garrison bristled at the implication. "My son is staying in this school. If there's a problem with how he's being treated by other students, I expect you to address that more effectively." The principal's lips thinned. "Of course, but perhaps for everyone's benefit." "We're done here," Garrison cut him off, turning to Elliot. "Come on, buddy. Let's go home." That night, after Elliot was finally asleep, Garrison sat alone in their small living room, staring out at the city lights. For the first time since the adoption, he allowed himself to question his decision. Had he been selfish to think he could provide what Elliot needed? Now, with his fortune gone and his resources limited, what kind of life could he offer? Maybe his family had been right all along. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Garrison wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at 9 in the evening. When he opened the door, he found a young woman standing in the hallway. She looked to be in her early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and an uncertain smile. "Mr. Holloway?" she asked. "Yes. Can I help you?" "My name is Phoenix." She shifted nervously. "Phoenix Thompson. I think my brother lives here." Garrison stared at her in shock. Thompson was Elliot's last name before the adoption. Phoenix nodded eagerly. "Yes, Elliot Thompson. He's my brother. We were separated when we were very young. I've been looking for him for years." Garrison hesitated, his protective instincts on high alert. "How did you find us?" "It wasn't easy," Phoenix admitted. "I aged out of the foster system 2 years ago and started searching for my birth family. I found documents showing I had a younger brother with Down syndrome who was put up for adoption separately." She pulled a folder from her bag. "I have our birth certificates, photos of our biological mother, everything. Please, Mr. Holloway, I've been searching for so long." Garrison studied her face carefully. Now that she mentioned it, he could see a resemblance to Elliot around the eyes and in the shape of her smile. "Elliot's asleep right now," he said finally. "But if you'd like to come in, we can talk." Over cups of tea, Phoenix shared her story. She and Elliot had different fathers, but the same mother, a woman named Dahlia, who had been pressured to give up both her children. "Our mother never wanted to surrender Elliot," Phoenix explained, showing Garrison a photograph of a young woman with kind eyes. "She was coerced by my father. He didn't want a child with special needs ruining his reputation." The phrase struck a chord with Garrison, reminding him uncomfortably of Thaddeus's initial reaction. "There's something else you should know," Phoenix continued, her expression growing serious. "During my search, I found some strange connections. The adoption agency that handled Elliot's case received substantial donations from a foundation called Future First. When I looked into who funds that foundation..." She slid a document across the table. Garrison looked down at the paper, then back at Phoenix in disbelief. "This says the primary donor is Senator Thaddeus Holloway." "Your brother has been funding the agency that placed Elliot for years," Phoenix confirmed. "And there's more. Future First specifically separates siblings in the foster system if one has a disability. They claim it makes both children more adoptable." "That doesn't make sense," Garrison said, shaking his head. "Why would Thaddeus be involved with such an organization? And why would he suddenly support my adoption of Elliot if he's been working behind the scenes to keep siblings like you and Elliot apart?" "I don't know," Phoenix admitted, "but it can't be a coincidence." The next morning, Garrison was making breakfast when he heard Elliot's excited voice from the living room, where he'd been watching cartoons with Wren. "You look like me!" Elliot exclaimed. Garrison wheeled quickly into the room and found Elliot standing in front of Phoenix, who had arrived early as planned. The boy was touching her face with wonder, tracing the shape of her eyes, which were indeed similar to his own. "Elliot," Garrison said gently, "this is Phoenix. She came to meet you because, well, she's your sister." "My sister?" Elliot looked confused, then amazed. "I have a sister?" Phoenix knelt down to his level, tears in her eyes. "Yes, you do. We were born to the same mom, but we were separated when we were very little. I've been looking for you for a long time." Elliot studied her face carefully. Then, with the directness that Garrison had come to love, he asked, "Do you want to see my drawings?" Phoenix laughed through her tears. "I would love to see your drawings." As they watched Elliot proudly show Phoenix his artwork, Wren leaned down to whisper to Garrison, "What does this mean for the adoption?" "I don't know," Garrison admitted, "but something strange is going on with Thaddeus's involvement. We need to find out what it is." Later, when Elliot was showing Phoenix his room, Garrison made a phone call to Marion Cole. "I need you to investigate something for me," he said, explaining what Phoenix had discovered. "If Thaddeus has been manipulating Elliot's case from the beginning, I want to know why." "This is serious, Garrison," Marion warned. "You're talking about potentially unethical or even illegal interference with adoptions by a sitting senator. Are you sure you want to pursue this?" Garrison looked toward Elliot's room, where he could hear his son's excited chatter as he showed Phoenix his special collection of rocks and shells. "I'm sure," he said firmly. "Whatever my brother is hiding, I need to know the truth. For Elliot's sake, and now for Phoenix's too." "Are you sure about this?" Marion asked, handing Garrison the file she had compiled. "Once we start, there's no turning back." Garrison took the folder, his expression grim. "I need to know why my brother suddenly supported the adoption after fighting it for months, and why he's been funding an agency that separates siblings like Elliot and Phoenix." 3 weeks had passed since Phoenix's arrival. She had become a regular visitor, spending time with Elliot after her shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nursing assistant. The siblings had formed an immediate bond, with Elliot eagerly showing Phoenix his world and Phoenix bringing photographs and stories of the mother they never knew. Marion had spent those weeks digging into the connections between Thaddeus and the Future First Foundation. What she'd found was disturbing. "It's all here," she said, gesturing to the file. "Financial records, emails, meeting minutes. Your brother has been the primary donor to Future First for 7 years. The foundation has influenced adoption policies at agencies across the state, always pushing to separate children with disabilities from their siblings." "But why?" Garrison turned a page in the file, staring at a photograph of Thaddeus shaking hands with the director of Future First. "What does he gain from this?" "That's where it gets interesting." Marion tapped a document near the bottom of the pile. "I found employment records for a woman named Dahlia Rivera. She worked as a housekeeper for your family about 7 years ago." Garrison looked up sharply. "Dahlia? That's the name of Elliot and Phoenix's mother." "Yes. And she was fired suddenly with a substantial severance package that required her to sign a non-disclosure agreement." Marion leaned forward. "The timing lines up perfectly with when Elliot would have been conceived." Garrison felt his stomach drop. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I can't prove it without a DNA test," Marion replied carefully. "But all signs point to Thaddeus being Elliot's biological father." The revelation hit Garrison like a physical blow. He thought back to his brother's sudden support at the adoption hearing, his years of funding an organization that separated children like Elliot from their families, his insistence that Garrison was making a mistake by adopting Elliot. It wasn't about politics or family image. Thaddeus had been covering up his own secret. "I need to confront him," Garrison said, closing the file. "Today." Thaddeus's office was in a sleek building downtown. As Garrison wheeled through the reception area, his brother's assistant jumped up in surprise. "Mr. Holloway, the senator isn't expecting you." "That's okay," Garrison replied, not slowing down. "This won't take long." He pushed open the door to find Thaddeus on the phone, feet up on his desk. His brother's expression changed from annoyance to concern when he saw who had interrupted him. "I'll call you back," Thaddeus said quickly, hanging up. "Garrison, what brings you here?" Garrison tossed the file onto the desk. "I know, Thaddeus." "Know what?" Thaddeus's face remained carefully neutral, but his eyes flicked nervously to the folder. "I know about Dahlia Rivera. I know about the Future First Foundation, and I'm fairly certain I know why you've been so invested in Elliot's adoption." Garrison leaned forward in his chair. "He's your son, isn't he?" The color drained from Thaddeus's face. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stood, walked to the office door, and locked it. "How did you find out?" he asked quietly. "Elliot's sister Phoenix showed up at my door 3 weeks ago. She's been searching for her brother for years. Once we knew their mother's name, it didn't take much digging to find the connection to our family." Garrison studied his brother's face. "What happened, Thaddeus?" Thaddeus sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older and very tired. "Dahlia worked for Mom and Dad when I was first running for state senate. We had an affair. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked." He rubbed his face. "My campaign was just taking off. I was engaged to Melissa. A scandal would have destroyed everything." "So, you paid her off and sent her away," Garrison said flatly. "It wasn't that simple. She didn't want money. She wanted to keep the baby, even after the Down syndrome diagnosis." Thaddeus looked away. "I convinced her it would ruin both our lives, that the child would have needs she couldn't afford, that adoption was the best option. And then you made sure Elliot disappeared into the system. You even separated him from his sister to make sure no one would ever trace him back to you." Thaddeus didn't deny it. "I told myself I was doing the right thing, that he'd be better off with a family that was prepared for a child with special needs. But no such family appeared," Garrison said. "Instead, he spent 6 years in group homes, shuttled from place to place because no one wanted him, until I met him at that gala, by pure chance." A bitter laugh escaped Thaddeus. "When you told me you were adopting a boy named Elliot with Down syndrome, I thought it had to be a sick joke. Of all the children in the system, you found my son." "He's not your son," Garrison said sharply. "You gave up that right when you abandoned him and his mother, when you actively worked to keep him separated from his sister." "I know that," Thaddeus said quietly. "That's why I changed my testimony at the hearing. I realized you could give him what I never could. A father who wasn't ashamed of him." Garrison studied his brother, seeing the regret etched in his face. "Elliot deserves to know the truth. So does Phoenix. And they both deserve to know their mother." Thaddeus paled. "Dahlia is out of the picture. The agreement was unethical and possibly illegal," Garrison cut in. "Phoenix has been searching for her for years. She believes her mother was coerced into giving up her children." "What do you want from me?" Thaddeus asked. "I want you to help us find Dahlia. I want you to tell Elliot and Phoenix the truth. And I want you to make things right." Garrison wheeled closer to the desk. "And there's something else. My company is failing because of mistakes I made while focusing on the adoption. I need an investor who believes in what we're trying to build. You want me to bail out your company? I want you to invest in your son's future," Garrison corrected. "Because regardless of DNA, Elliot is my son now. But you can still be part of his life, if you're brave enough to face the truth." 2 days later, they gathered in Garrison's apartment. Phoenix sat next to Elliot on the couch, holding his hand. Ren and Amir stood nearby for support. Thaddeus perched uncomfortably on a chair, looking more like a nervous schoolboy than a confident senator. "I don't understand," Elliot said, looking between the adults. "Uncle Thaddeus is my real dad?" "Biologically, yes," Garrison explained gently. "But I'm still your dad in all the ways that matter. Uncle Thaddeus helped bring you into the world, but he wasn't ready to be a father then." "Were you ashamed of me?" Elliot asked Thaddeus directly. "Because I'm different?" Thaddeus flinched at the question. "I was ashamed of myself, Elliot. I was a coward. I was afraid of what people would think. Like the kids at school who make fun of me? Yes, Thaddeus admitted. I was acting like those kids, and it was wrong. But Uncle Garrison wasn't afraid, Elliot said, looking at Garrison with adoration. No, he wasn't, Thaddeus agreed. He's braver than I ever was. Phoenix had remained quiet throughout the exchange, her face a mask of controlled anger. What about our mother? She finally asked. Where is she now? Thaddeus pulled a folder from his briefcase. Her name is Dahlia Rivera. After she left our family's employment, she moved frequently. The last address I have for her is in Clearwater, a coastal town about 3 hours from here. She was working as a hospice nurse. Phoenix took the folder with shaking hands. All these years, I thought she might have died or forgotten about us. But she was out there, just a few hours away. The agreement she signed prevented her from contacting either of you, Thaddeus explained, unable to meet Phoenix's eyes. But I don't think she ever stopped thinking about you. She tried to fight the adoption, but I had more resources, better lawyers. We have to find her, Phoenix said, turning to Garrison. Will you help us? Of course, Garrison replied. We'll go as soon as we can make arrangements. Elliot, who had been processing everything in his thoughtful way, suddenly looked up at Thaddeus. Are you going to take me away from Dad now? No, Elliot, Thaddeus said firmly. Garrison is your father in every way that matters. I just want to be part of your life if you'll let me. Elliot considered this, then nodded. Okay, but you have to be nicer now. A startled laugh escaped Thaddeus. I'm trying to be, buddy. I promise. The drive to Clearwater took just over 3 hours. Garrison, Phoenix, and Elliot traveled in a specially adapted van, with Thaddeus following in his own car. They had called ahead to the hospice center where Dahlia worked, but were told she was off for the day. Her home address was a small cottage near the ocean. As they pulled up to the modest house with its weathered blue shutters and garden of wildflowers, Phoenix grew visibly nervous. What if she doesn't want to see us? She whispered to Garrison. What if she turned her back on us willingly? From everything you've told me about your search, I don't believe that's true, Garrison reassured her. But whatever happens, you and Elliot have each other now, and you have me. Elliot, oblivious to the tension, was excited about being so close to the ocean. Can we go to the beach after we meet my mom? He asked, bouncing in his seat. We'll see, buddy, Garrison said, helping him out of the van. Thaddeus parked behind them but remained in his car, watching from a distance. Phoenix took a deep breath and knocked on the front door. For a long moment, there was no response. Then they heard footsteps, and the door opened. The woman who stood there was in her early 40s with streaks of gray in her dark hair and the same almond-shaped eyes as Elliot. She wore simple jeans and a faded t-shirt, and her hands showed the roughness of someone who worked hard for a living. She stared at Phoenix, her eyes widening in recognition. Phoenix? She whispered. Is it really you? Mom. Phoenix's voice broke on the word. Dahlia's hand flew to her mouth, tears immediately filling her eyes. Then she noticed Elliot, half hidden behind Garrison's wheelchair. Elliot? She gasped. My baby? Elliot looked up at Garrison, seeking reassurance. When Garrison nodded encouragingly, Elliot stepped forward. Hi, he said shyly. I'm Elliot. I like to draw pictures. A sob escaped Dahlia as she knelt down. I know, I remember. You used to draw on my arms with your fingers before you were even born. She looked up at Garrison, questions in her eyes. I'm Garrison Holloway, he explained. I adopted Elliot last year. Holloway, she repeated, her expression hardening. You're related to Thaddeus. He's my brother, and he's here too. Garrison gestured toward the car where Thaddeus still sat. There's a lot we need to talk about. Dahlia stood, wiping tears from her face. I have waited for this day for so long. Every birthday, every Christmas, I kept gifts for you both. She stepped back from the doorway. Please, come in. Inside, the small house was neat and filled with books. Photos covered one wall, many of children, presumably patients Dahlia had cared for over the years. On a shelf near the window stood 2 boxes, one labeled Phoenix and one labeled Elliot, each containing wrapped packages with dates written on them. "I never stopped hoping I would find you," Dahlia told them as Elliot examined the presents with wonder. "But the agreement I signed, they threatened to take everything if I tried to contact you. I had no money for lawyers to fight it." "Why did you sign it?" Phoenix asked, the pain of abandonment still evident in her voice. "To protect you," Dahlia replied. "Thaddeus made it clear that if I didn't disappear quietly, he would use his family's influence to make sure neither of you ever had a chance at a good life. I thought by agreeing, I was giving you both your best shot." Her voice broke. "But not a day went by that I didn't regret it." A knock at the door interrupted them. Thaddeus had finally gathered the courage to approach the house. When Dahlia saw him, years of pain and anger flashed across her face. "You have no right to be here." "I know," Thaddeus said quietly, "but I'm trying to make things right." "It's too late for that," she snapped. "You took my children from me. You made me miss their entire childhoods." "You're right," Thaddeus agreed, surprising everyone with his humility. "What I did was unforgivable. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm here to take responsibility and to help undo some of the damage I've caused." Garrison intervened before the confrontation could escalate. "Dahlia, I understand your anger, but for Elliot and Phoenix's sake, I hope we can all find a way forward. They deserve to have their mother in their lives." Over the next few hours, painful truths were spoken, tears were shed, and slowly, a plan began to form. Dahlia would move closer to the city to be near her children. Thaddeus would provide financial support for all of them, without strings attached. And most importantly, Elliot would remain with Garrison, with Dahlia and Phoenix becoming regular parts of his life. As the adults talked, Elliot happily opened 7 years' worth of birthday and Christmas presents. When he finished, he brought his favorite, a sketchbook with special pencils, to show Garrison. "Dad, look what Mom got me. Can I draw her picture now?" "Of course you can, buddy," Garrison replied, his heart full at hearing Elliot call both him and Dahlia by parental names without confusion or distress. As Elliot settled in to draw, Dahlia came to sit beside Garrison's wheelchair. "Thank you," she said softly, "for loving him when I couldn't be there." "He makes it easy," Garrison replied. "He's an amazing kid." "Yes, he is." She looked at him with genuine gratitude. "Phoenix told me how you fought for him, how you never saw his disability as a burden." "Because it's not." Garrison watched as Elliot carefully captured Dahlia's likeness on paper, his tongue sticking out in concentration. "It's just part of who he is, and who he is pretty wonderful." The months that followed brought enormous changes. With Thaddeus's investment, Garrison's company stabilized and began to grow again, focusing on a new line of communication devices inspired by Elliot's unique way of processing information. Dahlia found a nursing position at a children's hospital in the city and moved into an apartment just a few blocks from Garrison and Elliot. Phoenix enrolled in nursing school, determined to follow in her mother's footsteps. Most surprisingly, Thaddeus resigned from the Senate, citing a desire to focus on family and his charitable foundation, which he completely restructured to support families with children who had disabilities and to advocate for keeping siblings together in the adoption system. One evening, almost a year after their first trip to Clearwater, they all gathered in Garrison's apartment to celebrate Elliot's 8th birthday. The small living room was crowded with their chosen family: Garrison and Elliot, Dahlia and Phoenix, Thaddeus, Wren, and Amir, and even Marion, who had become a friend as well as their lawyer. As Elliot blew out his candles, Garrison felt overwhelmed by how much had changed. From the lonely man who had wheeled away from a charity gala, seeking solitude, he had somehow found this extraordinary family. Later, after the cake was eaten and the presents opened, Dahlia found Garrison on the balcony watching the city lights. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked, joining him. "I was just thinking about destiny," Garrison replied. What are the odds that of all the children in the system, I would meet Elliot, that his sister would find us, that we would all end up here, together? Maybe it's not about odds, Dahlia suggested. Maybe it's about love finding a way. Inside, they could see Elliot showing Thaddeus his latest artwork, a family portrait that included all of them, with Garrison at the center, his wheelchair detailed with loving care. You know, Dahlia said, following his gaze, when I first met you, I was worried that Elliot's disability and your wheelchair would make life too challenging for both of you. We have our tough days, Garrison admitted. Yes, but now I see that your understanding of living with a disability gave you a special insight into Elliot's needs. She smiled warmly. You were exactly the father he needed. And he was exactly the son I needed, Garrison replied. He taught me that family isn't about perfect circumstances or perfect abilities. It's about love. Stubborn, unwavering love. As if sensing they were talking about him, Elliot looked up and waved enthusiastically through the window. Garrison and Dahlia waved back, united in their love for this remarkable boy who had brought them all together. 18 years later, Garrison sat in the front row of the university auditorium, his hair now gray, but his eyes as bright as ever. Beside him sat Dahlia, Phoenix with her husband and young daughter, Thaddeus, and the ever-faithful Wren and Amir. On stage, a confident young man in graduation robes stood at the podium, preparing to deliver the valedictorian address. Elliot Holloway, now 26, adjusted his notes and looked out at the audience. When I was 7 years old, he began, his voice clear and strong, I met a man in a wheelchair who wasn't afraid of differences. He showed me that what makes us different also makes us special. Garrison felt tears prick his eyes as Elliot continued. My father taught me that barriers can be overcome, that families can be built in unexpected ways, and that love doesn't require perfect circumstances or perfect abilities. It only requires an unwavering heart. Elliot went on to announce the launch of the Holloway Foundation, dedicated to supporting adoptions for children with disabilities and their siblings. Funded by the billions now generated by Garrison's company, which Elliot had helped transform with his insights, the foundation would ensure that no child was overlooked because they were too difficult to place. After the ceremony, as they made their way through the crowd, a reporter approached Garrison. Mr. Holloway, 20 years ago you faced tremendous opposition when you adopted your son. What would you say to those who doubted your ability to raise him? Garrison smiled and looked at Elliot, who was now helping navigate his wheelchair through the crowded hall, their roles beautifully reversed. I would say that love finds a way, Garrison replied. Always,